Okay, welcome everyone. This is Corner to Corner Crochet Moss Stitch with Dana Neild. I am Jenny Bowden with Fave Crafts. I will be moderating today's event. Dana will be teaching us everything there is to know about Corner to Corner Crochet Moss Stitch. Like I said, we are recording this class. It is an hour long, so if you get overwhelmed, you just want to hang out and watch, that's great. We will email you a link to the recording in 24 hours. Before we get started, I wanted to just quickly tell you about this awesome digital magazine that we have. We are sponsored today by I Like Crochet Digital Magazine. So we have a special deal for you guys today. If you are not already a member, it is normally $49 for a 1-year subscription to I Like Crochet. But for you guys today, if you aren't a member, you can get a 1-year subscription for just $5. And I'll put the link in the chat. It's ilikecrochet.com/crochet22 to claim that deal. So it publishes 6 times a year. They've been publishing for, I think at least 5 years. So you get access to all of the back issues as well, which is really nice. The patterns are all tech edited professional photos. There's no ads, tons of different skill levels. Nancy said that she can't get the pattern. I will chat with you in a minute and help you navigate that, Nancy. But yeah, ilikecrochet.com/crochet22. You can gift it to a friend if you're already a member and you love it. You can share that with a friend or family member. It's a really great opportunity. Lots of free patterns, not free patterns, lots of tech edited patterns, but it's basically free because it's $5 for the whole year plus all of the back issues. So it's really great. So anyway, I think that is all I had. Like I said, we are recording. If you have any questions, please use the Q&A and we will get to those as best we can. And just a little bit more about Dana. She is the editor of favecrafts.com. She's been crocheting for 9 years. This is her first teaching class, so we are super excited. And she loves making baby blankets for friends and family, and she prefers patterns that feature an easy repeat so that she can work them up while hanging out with family or listening to a podcast. So without further ado, I am going to stop my screen share and pass it over to Dana, and we'll get started.
All right. Hi, everyone. Super happy to be here and teaching the class today. So I'll kind of talk about my interest in the class and the stitch. Folks are looking for the pattern. So there's a direct PDF download that I'll drop in the chat right now. If that's hard to find, because it ends up in your downloads folder on the computer, I'll send you, I'll also have it published on my website. I'll just drop that link here too, whatever is easier. So this will open in the browser. Otherwise, the PDF is, printable, and that's easier, and that's great and fantastic. Yeah, before we get started, so this is the blanket that I made using this stitch. It's a rainbowy baby blanket. And I had almost all this yarn in my stash already. It's hard to hold up the whole thing. It's kind of big. I had all this yarn in my stash already, and I wanted to do a pattern that I had weird amounts of each yarn left, and I was like, okay, how can I do this and still make it look pretty and not worry so much about having the perfect amount of yarn, like perfect amount left of each skein. So that's a little bit where corner to corner comes in, and that's where the uneven striping comes in. So that's just a brief glance at the blanket. Also, what inspired this pattern, and I'll drop this link in the chat too, there's a blog called Made by Gucci, and she has a ton of corner to corner content. Many of you might already be familiar with the traditional corner to corner stitch, which looks like little blocks. You can create like images that way that are like, you use like a pixelated chart, and you can create these beautiful patterns. But I didn't know there were other there are other corner to corner stitches that you can do. I didn't really know. And so this lovely article by Made by Gucci was kind of the inspiration as well. Oh, Linda says she loves her. Yeah, oh my goodness, I love her work. I've got so many of her patterns bookmarked. So anyway, I just wanted to give her a shout out because she's great and she inspired this whole pattern. Another reason I'm teaching the class today is when I was trying to learn this stitch, I thought it was very difficult to learn. Like, I looked at so many videos on YouTube and I could not figure out where to put the hook, where in the stitches, because it's kind of a tight mesh style stitch. I had a lot of trouble learning it and I got really frustrated. And so I'm going to be using a lot of stitch markers. It's going to be like stitch marker mayhem today, but it'll make it easier in the end. I used stitch markers the whole pattern, the whole time I was making the blanket. All right. I think that's probably all of the housekeeping stuff. Oh, and then the last thing I just wanted to say about corner to corner, this particular pattern is a really good one for temperature blankets. If you're unfamiliar with temperature blankets, you do a row a day throughout the whole year, and the color correlates with the temperature either in your region or wherever. So it ends up being this very uneven, again, the uneven striping, which is very beautiful. Some temperature blankets get enormous because it's 365 rows, but with this stitch, it wouldn't be such an enormous blanket. Okay, I think that's all. Jenny, if you want to go to my hands, we can dive in. I think somebody asked earlier if this class is suitable for beginners. Yes, but I am at this point going to start moving a little more quickly. So that's what the beauty of the recording is. You can rewatch parts over and over again. So it is all composed of single crochet and chain stitches. So it is a very beginner friendly stitch. All right, so materials you need for this, it's very simple. It's just a skein of worsted weight yarn from your stash. I've got this, this is, what is it? The Lily Sugar and Cream cotton yarn. So that's what I'm using today. You need a size I crochet hook or a 5.5 millimeter. Oh, it's blurry. Let's see if I can get it to focus on the text there. Okay, it's having trouble focusing on the text, but it's an I crochet hook, 5.5 millimeter. I'm using a Furls crochet hook today. I love them. You can use any I hook, and then stitch markers. I'm going to be using 5 over the course of working this pattern today. I like the clover stitch markers because they're silicone. They don't break as easily as some. And then, a tapestry needle to weave in your ends. So this one's just the Michaels brand, and then scissors to cut the yarn. Okie dokie. So to get started, we're going to start with a slip knot. For the beginners, the easiest way I conceptualize a slip knot is an ordinary knot. Let's see, an ordinary knot, you make a loop and you pull the end through, right? That's an ordinary knot. Instead of pulling the end through, here's my loop. I'm going to reach in for an angle. So here's my loop. I'm going to reach in between the loop with my fingers. Okay, sorry, it's like yarn mayhem. Okay, I'm reaching in and I'm not pulling the end all the way through. I'm just pulling it a little bit through the loop and then tightening everything up. I'm going to show that one more time. So I'm going to pull it out. Boop. You make your loop where you would ordinarily, for a regular knot, again, you're pulling that end all the way through. Instead of pulling it all the way through, I'm reaching in the middle, pinching, like pulling the yarn, but not the end all the way through, and then tightening everything up. I hope that makes some sense. If that's really confusing, there are other videos on YouTube, but that's how I make sense of a slip knot. Instead of pulling the end through, you're just pinching, you're pulling you're pulling part of that yarn through. All right, so you get your slip knot on the hook and you snug it up. Oh, it's a little blurry. Let's see. Okay, we're good. Yeah, it looks like my phone camera will be kind of refocusing throughout. All right, To start the pattern, we're going to start. So the way corner to corners worked, here's another little swatch that I did. Corner to corner, you start down here and you're growing this way. And then you start decreasing this way. So we're starting in this corner down here. All right. To start, we're going to chain 3. We got our slip knot on the hook. We're going to chain 3. So to chain, you just wrap the hook and pull through that loop. And wrap the hook and pull through that loop. So I've got my 3 chains on the hook. 1, 2, 3. All right. Already we're using a stitch marker. And this is probably going to seem excessive, but it will make sense later. So what I'm doing is just wrapping my stitch marker around that chain 3 I just made. It's just dangling there. All right, so that's the beginning. Row 1, all you do, row 1 is, it's itty bitty to start. And this is definitely the most challenging part of, I think, any crochet pattern is starting. But especially corner to corner, it's just gonna look like a triangular little blob in the beginning, but then it'll start to make sense after the first few rows. All right, so I wrapped my chain 3 with that stitch marker. Row 1, you're going to single crochet into the 3rd chain from the hook, and you're going to enclose that stitch marker as you do that single crochet stitch. So here's my 3 chains, 1, 2, 3. And I'm going to go into that 3rd chain from the hook to single crochet. So you just put the hook in there. Wrap, oh gosh, it's getting blurry again. I'll pause so that it can focus. There we go. All right, I put my hook in the 3rd chain from the hook, wrapped it, or yarn over is the proper phrase, pull through 1 loop. So I've got 2 loops on my hook, yarn over, pull through. All right, I'll set this down. This is the teeny little beginning triangle to start the corner to corner moss stitch. Doesn't look like a whole lot yet, but the reason we use that stitch marker is because it'll be a lot easier to see where to put our hook next time around. All right, at the end of this, we're chaining 2. So yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through, and turn your work. So that's row 1. Row 1 is just this teeny tiny little blob, but again, it's gonna start growing. That's the nature of the pattern. Now we're gonna do another stitch marker. And this stitch marker is going to go around the chain 2 you just made. And we're going to be using stitch markers around that chain 2 the whole pattern. The whole time we're increasing. It's going to make it so much easier to find where to put your hook. Because like I said, I found it very confusing when I was learning this stitch, and stitch markers saved the pattern for me. All right, so this over here in my left hand, that was the original stitch marker that we used, that we enclosed that starting chain with. Now you can see easily where you're supposed to put your hook. I wouldn't know where to put my hook if I didn't use the stitch markers, because this is a tighter stitch. I think it's just critical to use stitch markers. All right, so we're on row 2 now. I just placed a stitch marker around that chain 2 I just made. Now we're going to single crochet and chain 1 and single crochet into this this first chain 3 we made. Oh, it's getting a little blurry. There we go. So single crochet, insert the hook, yarn over, pull through, chain 1, and we're going to pause here and place another stitch marker. It's going to get outrageous. There's going to be so many stitch markers flying around in the beginning, but like I said, it's going to be so helpful as you work the pattern and as you get familiar with the way the stitch looks. All right, so I just did a single crochet and a chain 1, placed my stitch marker. I'm doing another single crochet into that same space. Wrapping the yarn, pulling through. Okay. I'm going to remove the first stitch marker because we don't need that anymore. And let's just pause and look at what we've got. So this is row 2. We've already completed 2 rows of this little pattern. We've got the chain 2 over here that we made. And then in this space was a single crochet, chain 1, stitch marker, single crochet. Chain 2. Turn your work. All right. We're going to enclose that chain 2 again. Like I said, we're going to get up to 5 stitch markers at any given point in this pattern. Well, I should say at one point we're going to get up to 5, but then it will, as the pattern gets bigger, it's going to be a little less chaotic with the stitch markers. All right, now we have a little more space here. We're on row 3. We placed a marker around the chain 2 we just made. Now we're going to single crochet, chain 1, and single crochet into the first chain 1 space. And that's right here. So this is the stitch marker we're working into next. And I don't know about you guys. Let me set this down again. This just looks like a big jumble of, like, again, mayhem, but it just looks like a jumble of yarn, right? But at least in the very beginning, seeing where to put your stitch, where to place your stitches will be helpful. As the fabric grows bigger, I'll show you how it's easier to recognize where to insert your hook. But right now it's just a lot of bunched up little stitches in the beginning. So, all right. So in this space here, I'm going to insert the hook, single crochet, chain 1, and you guessed it, we're going to place another stitch marker. And single crochet again. Oops, into the same space. So single crochet, chain 1, single crochet into the same space. Oops. Snagged the yarn a bit. Let me get that in there correctly. Okay, we can remove this stitch marker because we're done with it. Oh, I'm so sorry. It's single crochet, just chain 1 this time. I apologize. Single crochet, chain 1, stitch marker. And then over here at the end is where our increase comes in. We're going to insert single crochet, chain 1. Yes, we're going to place another stitch marker. And single crochet. And I'll remove this stitch marker because we don't need it anymore at the end. And we're going to pause and take a look at what we've got. So this was row 3. 3 stitch markers so far. Again, our little triangle is starting to get a little bigger. But it still kind of looks like a jumble of yarn, and it's hard to see where to put in the stitches. The next 2 rows, it'll get a lot clearer, and I'll show you how. Chain 2 at the end of each row. 1, 2. Turn your work. And we're going to use another stitch marker. In the beginning, say you're doing this pattern on your own later, just place a stitch marker in every chain space. Chain 1 spaces, chain 2 spaces, until you really get a good start on the fabric, and it's a lot easier to see where to place your hook. All right, row 3. And at this point in the pattern, it's row 3 until your desired size. That is when this is where the repeat comes in. This is where the mindless crochet comes in. I'm very passionate about mindless crochet patterns that you can do while watching TV, listening to a podcast, hanging out with your spouse, hanging out with your kids. Big fan. That's kind of all I want to make at this point. I've got 2 little kids at home. I'm very interested in mindless crochet patterns. So in row 3 and beyond is when we're entering that 1 row repeat. So in the first chain 1 space, which is where this marker is, you're gonna single crochet chain 1. So and put your hook where that marker is. Yarn over, pull through, and chain 1. All right, now I already placed my stitches here, so I'm going to move this stitch marker up around the chain 1 I just made. Oops, slowly but surely. Okay. All right, so we single crocheted chain 1. In the next stitch marker spot, same thing, single crochet. Insert your hook, yarn over, pull through both stitches, or both loops on the hook, I should say. Single crochet, chain 1. And once again, we're done with this stitch marker. We inserted our hook into that spot, so I'm going to move it up around that chain 1 I just made. Now we're at the last marker of the row, and that's where we single crochet, chain 1, single crochet. That's how we increase. So single crochet, chain 1, and again, I'll move up the stitch marker because we've inserted into that row already. Single crochet, chain 1, and then 1 more single crochet to finish off the row. We'll chain 2. And we'll lay that down. Let's take a look at our work at the end of this row. So here's 4 stitch markers. We're about to add a 5th one. We're starting to see maybe a little bit of a pattern here. Let's grab a little tool here. There's little V's here, or legs, whatever you want to call them. There's some legs here, some legs, some legs. But it's still just a little, it's a bigger blob, but it's still kind of a blob. Lots of stitch markers, lots going on. Again, now that we're entering this 1 row repeat, it's going to start to make more sense, especially as the fabric gets bigger, it'll be a lot easier to see where to place your hook. It won't be so slow. So I think, it's easy to get frustrated using stitch markers in the beginning because it so slows down your work, but it's a great way to ensure that you're placing your hook in the right spot and just to get the pattern started. Like I said, I almost gave up on this pattern. I was so frustrated, but I love how the fabric looks. So I really was determined to learn it. All right, we're going to turn our work. And I'm wrapping a stitch marker, around this chain 2 I just made. Slowly but surely wrapping it around the chain 2. Let me straighten that out so you guys can see. I think my stitch got twisted. That's fine. Okay. Here we are. Let me lay it out again. Here's our 5 stitch markers. All right. We did it. We got to the 5 stitch markers. And here we go. In the first marker over here, other than the one that's on around our hook already, around our chain 2, gonna insert yarn over, pull through those 2 loops, chain 1. So single crochet, chain 1. I'm moving the stitch marker up. We move on to the space where there's the next marker. Single crochet. Sees. Pull through both loops. Single crochet, chain 1. And I'm going to move this stitch marker up. My goodness, I know it's so clunky on camera. It's hard to see because it's just the angle it's at. It's hard to see a little bit. So I hope the frequent pauses are helpful. So we did a single crochet and a chain 1. In this next spot where there's another stitch marker, we're going to single crochet and chain 1. We're going to move that marker up. Oof. All right. And now we're at the last marker. This is the chain 2 space at the end of the row. And that's where we single crochet, chain 1, single crochet. Insert your hook, single crochet, chain 1. Once again, I'm going to move up this marker. And a final single crochet in the same space completes the row. And chain 2. All right, let's set that down. Let's take a look at what we've got. All right, by now, hopefully, we are able to get, we're starting to see this mesh, this pattern come to life a bit. So here you can see a row. There's these 2 V's, those are your single crochets. Over down here, we're seeing these little V's throughout. Lots of little V's. Those V's are going to be helpful as we see where to put our crochet hook over the next couple of rows, the next number of rows. So let's see, I just saw this question pop up. The brand of stitch markers, I like Clover stitch markers. They're slightly more expensive than some other brands, but I've also purchased the cheaper brands and broken them a lot. I'm probably too hard on them, but to me, the more expensive, the silicone ones from Clover are, then I never break those. So those are my favorite. I also like how kind of skinny they are. Maybe you guys saw, well, obviously you saw, as I'm working, I like leaving the marker in as I work the stitch around it, and that's easier to do when they're so skinny. So I prefer the Clover brand. All right, we're gonna turn our work and move on to the next row.
Dana, real quick, it is 11:30. Do you want to do a quick intermission or do you want to keep going?
You know, let's do one more row and then we can do intermission. Does that sound good?
Yep.
Awesome. Okay, so at this point, I'm gonna take out a couple stitch markers. But hopefully I'll point out, so by now we've seen those V's, right? In between these V's, right here, are where we are inserting our stitches. So I'm going to take out a couple in the middle. I'll go slow and hopefully that it will be easy at this point, easy enough to see where to insert your stitches by now, hopefully. But I am still wrapping the chain 2 at the end of every row because even though I made that whole blanket using this stitch, I think it's hard to see where to put your stitches at the end of the rows. And this way, if you're marking the end of your rows anyway, you know you're not going to accidentally skip a stitch at the end of the row and now you have a wobbly edge on your blanket. I think you should mark the end of each row in any blanket pattern that you're working on. I think it makes it more foolproof and mindless, so you don't have to worry about it. Yes, it slows down your work slightly, but I always get overconfident making blankets and I think, oh, I don't need stitch markers. And then I drop some stitch. I miss some stitch at the end of a row and I end up with a wobbly edge. So, all right, so here we are. The first stitch I think is kind of hard to see because there's all these V's close together. Let me get this little pointer again. V, 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 V. So I like leaving the stitch marker here and the final cluster on each row too. But again, we're inserting here in between V's, here in between V's, and here. So insert your hook, single crochet, chain 1, and we're done with this marker, so I'll remove it. All right, here we are. Where do we insert the hook? It is in between these V's. So right, oh, of course it went blurry right at the key moment. Here we go. Right here, in between these clusters of V's is where we're going to insert the hook, single crochet, chain 1. We've got another cluster like in between this section, this spot right here, again, in between the V's. It's where we're inserting our hook again. Insert, yarn over, pull through, single crochet, chain 1. Here's another set of V's. Insert the hook, single crochet, chain 1. And now we're at the last spot in the row. We're still using stitch markers on the edges. Insert your hook. We're going to single crochet, chain 1, single crochet. And again, I think it's easier. I think it's a good idea as well in this last cluster to still use a stitch marker on that chain 1. It's single crochet, chain 1, single crochet at the end of each row. And that's a good place to still use a marker. So I'll do my final single crochet. And chain 2. I'll show you what that looks like and then we can do intermission. Here's our little fabric so far. Starting to take a little blurry. There we go. Starting to take shape. All right, Jenny, if you want to do intermission, now is a great time. I'm going to do another row or two while you handle that.
Okay, I am going to do a quick screen share again. I hope everyone's having a great time. Can you all see my screen about our free crafting classes?
I see it.
All right. Well, we have some upcoming classes that you might want to join us for. If you've always wanted to learn how to quilt, we are doing a learn to sew a quilted mug rug on March 7th. And you can sign up for all these classes at favecrafts.eventbrite.com. So March 7th, learn to sew a quilted mug rug. And then on March 21st, a learn to knit class. And these are all taking place same time and same place. So all on Zoom, all virtual classes, Tuesday at 11 a.m. Central Time. If you can't make that time, you can always sign up for the class. We record all of the classes, so you'll get an email 24 hours after each class with a link to the recording, just like we are doing today. So if you want to take one of these classes, but that date or time doesn't work for you, don't let that stop you. Be sure to sign up anyway. It's free, so what have you got to lose? And then just one more time, that great offer from I Like Crochet digital magazine. It is a digital magazine, so there's no print issues mailed to your house. It's all available online, and they publish 6 times a year. They've been in business for the last 8 years. They've been publishing. So tons of great content over the last 8 years. You get access to all of the back issues. So just $5 for a 1-year subscription, plus, like I said, access to all the back issues. Tons of great patterns. Everything is tech edited, so you don't have to worry about, getting halfway through a pattern and then realizing it was a horribly written pattern and you've made a lot of mistakes. So everything is tech edited. Great photos, tons of different types of patterns, different skill levels, beginner to advanced. You can gift it if you're already a member and you love it. So yeah, ilikecrochet.com/crochet22. I will put that link in the chat. Again, it's just $5, which is an awesome deal. Normally it's $49. This is an introductory rate for you guys today if you're not already a member. So, okay, I think that's it. I'm going to pass it back over to Dana.
Okie dokie. All right. I'm off camera working up a couple more rows just so it's a little easier to see the fabric. Because again, in the beginning, it's just a little squishy blob. All right, so let's see. I did 2 more rows. Let's lay it out. Let's take a look because we have to start. Well, I've got to show you guys how to change colors. I promised that. And then we have to start decreasing. So actually, let me take out this stitch marker because that's not necessary anymore. Here is our fabric. So it's, come on, focus. There we go. Here's our fabric. So again, we're starting to see a lot of these little V's, and in between each of those V's is where we are inserting our hook. Those are the chain 1 spaces. So these are our single crochets, and in between are those chain 1 spaces. And then again, at the end of the row, I keep using stitch markers because I think I have no idea in this little, again, blob over here, where to insert the hook. I think it's confusing. It is next to this V if you want to work on it without using stitch markers. I mean, you can look for that. I think it's just easier to use the stitch markers myself. So that is a little swatch of what this fabric looks like. It looks so beautiful and woven, especially if you change colors each row. So I'll bring my little swatch over here again that I worked on a little bit ago. So here, this section of green, it's turning out a little dark on camera. These are green stitches. That's just 1 row of the green. And you can see it looks just, beautiful and woven and almost like little, like raindrops even that are scattered throughout. So if you're changing colors really frequently, like every row, you'll get a very beautiful woven effect. You will have a million ends to weave in. So that is the challenge. This little swatch was a lot of ends to weave in, but it's so beautiful when it's done. So just wanted to show what that would look like. So
Dana, we do have a quick question. I just posted it in the chat. Someone is wondering, is there a left and right side for this pattern? And if so, how can you see that?
There really isn't. Not as far as I know, at least. It looks the same to me on both sides with the V's and everything. If you were to make a rectangle, I'm not showing that in this class, but if you were to make this into a rectangle, you would increase on one side and decrease on the other side for a while. And at that point, then you have a left and right side. And what I would recommend is just marking the increase side with a different type of stitch marker. Maybe tie a piece of yarn on that side to really make it obvious that that's your increase side. Again, we're not going to cover that in this class, but that is what you would do. Otherwise, yeah, it's not important which side's the left side and which side's the right side. So yay. Okay, sweet. So let's start decreasing, and during the decreasing I'll show you guys how to change colors if you're unfamiliar, just because we only have 20 minutes. So all right, the first decrease row, once again, you're still marking your chain 2 with a stitch marker. You're going to skip this first cluster, and actually let me go ahead and mark where you're actually putting your hook in, because that's confusing. So this first time around, you're skipping this single crochet, chain 1, single crochet cluster, and you're going to, I'm even going to pull out this stitch marker. You're going to insert your hook after that first cluster. So that's over here. Here's our first chain 1 space after the first cluster here. And in that chain 1 space, you're just going to single crochet and chain 1. And actually, I'm going to put a stitch marker there because I think that will be helpful as we start decreasing. So single crochet, chain 1. We're going to move along like we've been doing our increase rows in those chain 1 spaces in between the V's. We're going to single crochet, chain 1, single crochet, chain 1, single crochet, chain 1. Getting close to the end, single crochet, chain 1. And now we've got 2 stitches left. I should have left that marked, but here, I'll make it a little obvious now. We've got these 2, so that's our last, this is our last chain 1 space, and here's our chain 2 space. In the last 2 spaces of the row, we're going to just single crochet in each one. And that's how we begin decreasing. And here I go. I'm going to mark the last chain 1 I did. Okay, again, all the stitch markers again, we're back up to 5, but it'll be temporary. So in this last chain 1 space, we're single crocheting. I'm going to remove that stitch. And then in the second, or in the chain 2 space at the very end of the row, we're single crocheting again. No chain space here. All right. That was our first decrease row. It will be more obvious in a minute here. Chain 2 and turn. We chain 2 at the end of each row. Something I'll mention, if you go to Made by Goody, her pattern has you chain 3 at the end of the rows, and that's lovely. And it creates a little bit more of an eyelet pattern for the border. But yeah, this particular version, you just chain 2 at the end. All right, let's pause here a second. We're starting to decrease. You can see this edge here is starting to taper a bit. And over here, it'll be more obvious the next row, but this is starting a little bit to taper as well. Now for the second decrease row, you're going to skip these 2 single crochets you just made and insert this first chain 1 space and continue along as we've been doing with a single crochet and a chain 1. So we're skipping the first 2 single crochets, inserting the hook, single crochet, chain 1. Remove that marker now that we're done with it. Again, in between the V's, we're going to single crochet, chain 1, single crochet, chain 1, single crochet, chain 1, Now we're at the last 2 chain 1 spaces of the row. Well, excuse me, I should say the last chain 1 space and then the last chain 2 at the end of the row. So when you get to these 2 stitches at the end, you're going to single crochet in the last chain 1 space and single crochet again into this chain 2 space. Just the 2 single crochets. You're going to come up on the end of the rows, I think, faster than you think you will. That's how I felt, at least when I was working up the pattern. It's like all of a sudden we're already at a decrease row and it seems like there's so much left at this edge, but that's how it goes. All right, so I wrapped my last chain 1 stitch with a stitch marker. I'm going to insert the hook, single crochet, and insert the hook into the chain 2 space, single crochet again, chain 2, and we'll turn. I'll move this stitch marker because we're done with it. Oof, blurry again. And I'm going to move up the stitch marker. Again, we're always wrapping the chain 2 at the end of each row with a stitch marker. All right, so here you can see even more. You're really starting to notice the decrease. We're curving in over here. We're curving in over here. It's a little bumpy over here. I'm pretty sure that's a tension problem of mine. As you decrease on a small swatch too, the little bumps, there are going to be some kind of, I guess I'll call them eyelet bumps. And that's more obvious on a small swatch. On the big blanket, that's not nearly as obvious. So, okay, so as we continue to decrease, here is the decrease repeat. Now we skip the first 2 single crochets, insert the hook into the chain 1 space and do our single crochet chain 1 as we were until you get to the last 2. And I didn't mark it over here. I'll mark it for you guys so it's extra obvious. You get to your last chain 1 space and then the chain 2 at the end of the row. And that's when you do just a single crochet here, a single crochet here. I'll do this row and then I will show you changing colors. All right, so we skip those first 2 single crochets, single crochet, chain 1. And I'll remove this marker. We don't need it anymore for now. Single crochet, chain 1, single crochet, chain 1, and here we are at the last 2 chain spaces on the row. Once again, I'm going to mark this last chain 1 space. I'm going to insert the hook and just do, oh my goodness. Yeah, like I said, stitch marker, mayhem. As you work a really big swatch, say you're going to make a dishcloth, say you're going to make a baby blanket like I did, it will be less stitch markers everywhere because they'll be spread out over the course of long rows. So it's just working such a small swatch that it's kind of a lot. Okay, that's our first single crochet to decrease, and here's our next single crochet. Oh, but I'm going to stop there because we're going to change colors this row. And the way you do that, to get, a polished look, here I am. I started my single crochet. This is the final single crochet of the row. What you'll do is you're going to complete the stitch with your next color. So I've got red over here. Hopefully the red shows up all right on camera. So I started with the green. I thought it was a little easier to see, but we're going to just lay it on the hook and pull it through to complete your single crochet. We got to snug everything up a bit. Make sure you grab your working yarn that's attached to your skein and not your tail. And continue along. Chain 1, chain 2, and turn. Okay, I'm going to cut the green yarn. Always leave a good length tail, even for something really small. Say you decide to make face scrubbies with this pattern, so you're working really small squares or coasters or a mug rug. Always leave a decent sized tail. You're never going to be upset that you left too long a tail, unless you're really down to the end of a ball of yarn and you're trying to use every last bit. But it's so much easier to weave in the ends if you leave like a good 6 inches or so of a tail. All right, so I'm working with my red yarn now. I'm going to snug everything up. Now, what you could do with these little trailing ends is you'll weave them in later, so that should secure them enough in the future. I like to tie knots. I know that's like, people are going to leave this class and think I'm not professional for saying that, but I really like just making so certain that the yarn is staying put. And if you put a border on your patterns, that hides anything that might resemble a knot. Anyway, I won't do that right now, but this will take care of itself later if you just weave it in, or you can tie a knot to be totally sure it's not going anywhere. I chained 2, and now we're just continuing with the decrease. Insert my hook. Well, we're skipping. I'm inserting where I marked, but we're skipping this first little single crochet over here. And we're skipping this single crochet, which is even more confusing to see when you change colors, in my opinion. That's why, again, love the stitch markers. Insert your hook, single crochet, chain 1. I'm going to remove that marker. Shoes out of the way. Okay. Single crochet, chain 1. And again, it's a small swatch. All of a sudden, we are already at the end of this row. We've got, this is our last chain 1 space of the row, and then here's our chain 2 space. So we're going to mark the chain 1 we just made. Single crochet, single crochet, chain 2. I'll remove that marker and we'll turn the work. All right. Let's just pausing a second so we can let the camera, focus on everything. Oh my goodness. And with the color change, I forgot to mark the chain 2 at the end of the row, but it's easy to see because it's kind of loose right now. Let's remove this because we don't need that. All right. So we're really getting close to the end here, which is good. I've got 11:53 on my clock. So we're skipping these first 2 single crochets. Single crochet, chain 1. And now we just have the 2 stitches left. Here's our last chain 1. Here's our chain 2. So we'll do the 2 single crochets. Single crochet, single crochet. Yeah, I think the green yarn's easier to see. I don't know about you guys. The red's a little hard, but hopefully by now the pattern's coming together well enough that it's not too big of an issue. Yeah, the green's way easier to see. All right, so we've completed that row. Forgot to mark my chain 1 spot. That's important. And my chain 2 at the start of the row. Oh my goodness. See, now it's hard to see because, well, it'll be easier to see when we turn. It's hard to see. That's why I mark them usually. All right. We're chaining 2 at the end of the row. Now we're on our second to last row. I'm placing a marker around that chain 2. Oh my goodness gracious. Yeah, it's really hard to see. There we go. All right. In the second to last row, you're placing that marker around the chain 2 you just made. You're single crocheting into the chain 1 space. Oops. And then you're going to single crochet into the chain 2 space. So just the 2 single crochets this time. We'll remove that. This is the very end. This is the only row in the whole pattern where you're only chaining 1 at the end of the row. Last row, you chain 1, and you turn. And here, at this last chain 2 space, you're going to single crochet into the last chain 2 space. Cut your yarn. And pull through. Snug a few things up here. And here is our little green and red, you know, Christmassy little swatch. So this would make a good face scrubby. I used cotton yarn, so that's probably what I'm going to use this for beyond this class. You can see that you've got this square shape. This is where we started. If I turn it, and we worked, we grew on this edge, we shrank at this edge. We've got 11:56. I'll show weaving in ends because I know we've got a few beginners here today. So I'll do that, and then if there's any additional questions, we can answer those and then be on our way. So real quick, weaving in ends. So you got your tapestry needle. A good way to get the yarn through the eye of the needle is just wrap it tightly. Oh, of course, it's not focusing. I'm so sorry about that. All right, here we go. Wrap it tightly and then kind of just wiggle it through. All right, so you've got your tapestry needle. So what I like to do is kind of just try to go under the stitches as much as possible. And in fact, I'm going to kind of go up this way so that it's just a little less obvious where you've woven it in. So you go through one way, pull it through. And again, it'll be easier to see. Here, I'm going to turn this so it's easier to see. It'll be easier to see on a smaller project, but hopefully it'll be hidden nicely on a larger project. And you know, it's not going to be too obvious. Then catch a loop somewhere. I'll grab this one, go back through roughly the way you just came. So let's do that. Oh, holding it a little too high up. Okay, you go back through roughly the way you came after catching a loop. And don't pull too tight because you don't want your fabric bunching up, but don't, you know, be too loose about it either. And one more time, again, I'm going to catch a loop, come back through this way, and pull through. Oops. All right, so basically 3 passes. 3 passes is a nice amount because that should snug it up without making like such a bulky ridge. Sometimes I would do like 4 or 5 passes because I really didn't want it to come out, and then I'd have kind of a lump in there. So 3 passes is a nice number, and then you'll just trim it off. All right. So there is our little swatch of the corner to corner moss stitch. And let's swing over to the sample that I made the other day. Focus on the stitches, camera. There we go. So again, if you have more colors, it adds some interest. If you switch each row, then that's how you get these little dots that really give it that woven look. Again, great stash buster. I had all of this yarn in my stash to make this baby blanket, so I was really excited to find a pattern that I could just do as many rows as I wanted of each color and whatever I thought looked nice, is how I went about it. So also I'll say too, I didn't put a border on the moss stitch baby blanket. I was going to, and then didn't like how it looked, changed my mind. So it's definitely an option to put a border on it. I think it looks lovely without one. Okay, Jenny, are there any questions about anything before we skedaddle? I have noon on my clock, so I do apologize if folks have to go.
Yeah, I don't think so. Just a lot of people saying thank you, and they're very excited to practice. Someone was asking about edging in between. I don't know what that means. Edging in between. Yeah, I'd have to scroll up and try to find the comment. I'm not sure what that means either. I apologize. How about those edging in between? So that was from Belle. So I don't know, Belle, if you want to clarify at all if we have time. Otherwise, I'm going to do a quick screen share. And let me see here. Share screen. Okay, screen share. This is Dana's contact information. So thank you, Dana, for teaching today's class. If anyone has any questions, feel free to reach out either to myself or Dana. My name is Jenny, and Dana was our wonderful instructor today. One more time, this deal from our friends at I Like Crochet Digital Magazine for just $5. You can get a one-year subscription to the I Like Crochet Digital Magazine. They publish 6 times a year. And then favecrafts.com. Dana is the editor of favecrafts.com. So that is our one-stop shop of all free content, free crafting content. We have knitting, crochet, sewing, general crafts, paper crafts. We have a free email newsletter. We will send a link to sign up for that in the email tomorrow. So again, we did record today's class. So we will send a link in 24 hours to the video recording of the class, as well as a pattern, the pattern that Dana used today, plus the I Like Crochet deal as well. So thank you guys for joining us today. Thank you, Dana, for leading the show. And if anyone has any additional questions that we didn't get to, feel free to reach out either to Dana or myself. So thank you guys. Have a wonderful day. All right. Thanks so much, Jenny, for moderating, and thanks everyone for coming today. Have a good day.